Okay, so that's 15 minutes. Okay, so there was a time when we were in Blakeney when John was using the image of the iceberg a lot. So this sense, you know, because we're sort of sitting like a triangle. So there's this sense that your body and your consciousness really is the tip of the iceberg. So this feeling that beneath the ground, that's where your depth really is. So for John, energy was never what the scientists call. So for a scientist, energy is just the capacity to do work. For John, energy was more like the unconscious. So when John would give a talk, it definitely wasn't coming from cogitation. It was this sense that something was being dredged out of the deep ground and coming up through him. So he was very much like a channel for the earth. So here, just feeling that part of you that's beneath the surface. And so you've got the part of you that's beneath, and that's always sort of melting in and out of the ocean. So you've got the part of you that's the deep part that's you don't see, but then you've also got the ocean, which that is contained in. So what the analysts call Thalassa, which is just a Greek word for sea. So that's like the cosmic feminine, really. The cosmic vagina, this thing that we're actually immersed within, we're contained within it. Yeah. So it's just, when we're meditating, we're just trying to get a feeling for that sort of continuum. And then you just realize that this is just very sort of bitty and just irrelevant, really. Okay, so let's stand up and do some. Dave's in heaven. It's a good place to be. So just retaining that feeling. So this, you know, so now we're very much a triangle or a pyramid. So this sense that yeah, the biggest part of us is really underground. So what helps us connect to the sort of depth, the continuum really, is slow movement and breathing. Yeah, so we're moving in such a way that we're sort of emulating or making the breath visible. So David Bohm had that lovely quote, you know, matter is frozen light. Yeah. So it's like we are pyramids. We're not pyramids, icebergs. We're frozen water. A frozen part of the continuum that's just come together just for a time, and then will just dissolve. So they say in Zen, you know, when you meditate, you die. So for that time, you just melt into spaciousness, into the feminine. So in order for this area to remain relaxed, you have to pull with the leg. Otherwise, coming into the leg will compress here. So we're just looking at what it means to get our bums in, to actually allow the upper body and the lower body to just merge and just become one body. So the way I try to explain it to my students here now is like the box of chocolates, you know. So the box of chocolates is being handed around after dinner. And, you know, that sense of expectation and delight and everything as you reach out with your hand and take this delicacy, this delectable. And so your mind is already in the chocolate. Yeah? The chocolate is already in your mouth before you've even reached it with your hand. Yeah. And so that same sense with the feet are just like the hands that are reaching for the chocolate. The foot is reaching for this part of the ground. So I just have to become, you know, just as interested in the ground beneath this foot as I am in the chocolate. And it's just a matter of reprogramming ourselves. So our normal mind is very much structured around a hierarchy with itself on high, lording it over the rest of creation, and our lowly feet at the bottom, slaves. Yeah. So we're just trying to democratize our being, really, just make every part just equal. So God is immanent, not transcendent. He's everywhere. He's in everything. It's the ocean. It's the continuum. It's the feminine. Yeah, for the Gnostics are really interesting. Yeah, so they believe that, you know, basically what we see, the universe of matter is basically a fallen state. It's a frozen state. And it was almost like an accident. And that the real universe is the universe of light. And that was feminine. The universe of light was feminine, and the fallen state, the state of matter, is masculine. So this has to be relaxed. It's an elastic pull. It's very much got the quality of the elastic just drawing into itself. So it's just these really sort of subtle tensile forces. There's a stretch here, and it's that pulls me back. I never push myself. So this becomes passive as I sink into it, and this is now the active part. This is the part that's starting to pull. And just feel what it does in the heart. So as it pulls, oh, something is pulling here as well. Yeah, and I mean, for me, the difficulty is keeping it in almost like a state of suspension. Because as soon as you get into something, as soon as you get into like the groove, then it starts to solidify around the ego. So the ego is getting a handle on it. You know, you're feeling a bit better about it. You know what you're doing. So all of that is like something that we'd like to just repress, keep it back. Keep our desire to understand back, and just let the energy just be loose and soft. Because that's what we've done. You know, that's what the ego has done to our world. It's basically made it very difficult for the unknown, and especially the unknowable, to sneak in. So we're just trying to just leave the door open, really. You see it everywhere in human culture. You know, so something like like Bach, the composer. So this idea of the theme and variations. So you've got like the Goldberg variations with that exquisite theme at the beginning, the aria, and then all these sort of gradually getting more and more clever variations. So what we'd like is just to extend the beginning phase, so it never settles into something that you know. Okay. And now let's just bring it to riding horse. So again, just this is the important bit, really. We know where my spine joins the legs, so the sacrum, the hips. So loosen the hips. So this sense that the lordosis in my lower back is pretty much ironed out. and my spine becomes like two tentacles that reach down the backs of the legs and can from there penetrate into the ground. So it's almost a sense that your legs are like roots. So almost like the ground is here and your legs are just two roots that have just shot out of the spine and gone down. And just really just keeping the ends open. This is what we find difficult. So this is what happens. It's what the ego always tries to do. It tries to close the system so that it can wank to itself, so that it can just go around and circulate within itself. So this is the mind. The thinking mind just circulates like this. It's always bringing everything back into itself. It's accumulating, it's greedy, yeah, and it's frightened. So our circuit is the opposite one. So I'm sliding down my back and into the legs, and that just brings something up here. And we just want to keep that so it never really becomes a circuit because the ends are open. Yeah, this just goes down and down, and this just comes up and up. So in order to keep the ends open, we just have to be really experienced at just relaxing and slipping into energy. Because when the ends are open, what flows in and out all the time is energy. So when we close the ends, then basically the energy becomes something. It starts to take shape and structure. It becomes like an object that we can possess and bargain with. So something here just has to just remain open so I can have a sense that I'm almost emptying into the ground, and just trust that it's that will bring up this energy from the ground. So I become this flow, this dual flow, rather than a solid body. Okay, now let's just breathe with it. So here we're just sort of making it just pliable and elastic, like this sort of elastic spine, like the young tree that's blowing in the wind. So just feeling the body as this really pliant thing that is just full of feeling, full of sensuality, sexuality. There's just these two phases, the in-breath and the out-breath. So this is me sort of just melting. And then this is me becoming something. It's like I'm taking on a little bit of shape. And then it all just melts away again. Yeah, so you're basically this sort of sea creature, you know, like the octopus or a whale. Think of those blue whales, you know, sort of the whole ocean is their domain, and they just travel enormous distances. Just think what, you know, what superior creatures they are to us. You know, they're just connected to like time and their environment in a way that we're completely dislocated from. So it's like, you know, when they're hunting whales, what they used to do was kill the baby, because the mother will not leave the wounded or the dead baby, and then they kill the mother. I mean, just think what sort of mind comes up with something like that. Yes, that's just basically what we're doing to the planet, you know. We're killing the mother. Just a couple more. And if the breathing phases want to switch, then just let it. So if you want to breathe in here and then breathe out here, that's great. But you just want it to sort of switch naturally. I mean, this is the difficulty. It's like, you know, the advanced phase really needs to develop out of the beginning phase, not just within your career, but within each session. So it's like when you're meditating, there's almost a sense of almost collapsing into the ground. And then from that, it can become the spine can become erect again in the right way. You're not imposing a structure. It's just coming from somewhere. You've got no idea where. It's coming from the ground, basically. Yeah, so I'm connecting to the ground, not as this hard surface, which I am propping myself up from, but as the source of the unconscious, the source of energy, depth, the subterranean, a subterranean seriousness. There's a beautiful poem by Charles Olson which starts, wholly absorbed into my own conduits to an inner nature or subterranean lake, the depths or bounds of which I more and more explore and know more of. Yeah. So that's life, really. Slipping into the sea. Okay, now let's just using the body to try and activate this this really primal physical sense, this muscularity in the lower back, where our ruthlessness resides, this sort of animal ruthlessness. which our society would like to completely eradicate. Yeah. So it's like Tai's always sending me clips on like Instagram and YouTube of like people that go and visit a zoo, you know, where there's like a glass separating them and the lions or the tigers. Yeah, and the tiger sort of leaping at the glass to try and get to the people and consume them. And people just standing back and giggling, laughing at this scene. You know, so that's just how completely dissociated we are from our energy. Yeah. I remember taking Max to London Zoo once. I went to see the gorillas, and there was a big glass and all these people in front of the glass. And I thought, where's the gorilla? Because they're obviously looking, and he was right next to the glass. He was so close, I didn't see him. This enormous silverback, and everyone was just tapping the glass and laughing. I just burst into tears. It was so obscene. That's what nature has become, an amusement. So this is definitely not an amusement, this exercise, because you're really getting into something that is the part of you that doesn't have a sense of humor. The part that does not suffer fools gladly or lightly. Just feeling that your lower body is very, you know, so your hips aren't turning, not because you've stiffened up, but because it's just become so settled. Yeah, so if I want to turn my hips, I really have to turn these muscles even more. Yeah, so the hips are like almost like the last thing to turn when you're turning. I turn it and then they go. So yeah, so a lot of our turning was just, in a sense, just a bit too easy. It was like the greased slide, you know, we'd put too much oil on the slide. And it was disconnected from the ground. You know, so when you're turning like this, it's not coming from the ground at all. Yeah. So now just getting the hands, just turning the other way, so it just becomes waving hands, like clouds or in the clouds. So, but very different from this sort of wafty, oh, isn't this wonderful? Yeah, it's really pulling from here. It's getting me into the ground. It's really using the leg. I'm not using the legs to push my hips around. The legs are simply a source of energy. The work is being done by the muscles in the lower back. And again, just relaxing the tentacles out of the sacrum, down the legs. So they're like channels, really. They're like tubes. So then the ground can reach up and just clear my mind. It's like lethargy, lethargic. You know, it just comes from the Greek word lethe, which was a river in Hades that the souls of the dead were forced to drink from. that cause forgetfulness. So they then forgot of everything from their life on earth. So there's this sense that we're just drinking from something that's just clearing the head, not only of memories, but of concepts and ideas and clarity, really, just eschewing clarity for the sake of connection. Because when things are clear, you're very much distinct from them. You're very much disconnected. So everything's becoming misty, the cloud of unknowing. We just feel as you concentrate on the relaxation, it tends to do this, yeah. Almost like your spine is beginning to collapse a little bit, yeah. So we need that. That's like the beginning. Just sinking and relaxing, yeah. And then when you start activating these muscles, then it's like something in you comes alive, and then you start rearing up from the ground. And that's when you get this circuit going. So this circuit is like what I call the depressive circuit. So because basically what's happening is your heart is falling and dropping, a heavy heart, and your body is coming out of the ground. So you're losing your roots. So what Yung Chen Pu called floating, yeah, it's the big sin in Tai Chi. Yeah. So when people would put his hands on them, relative to him, they would be floating. So he got the feeling that they were using him as support. They were rooting through him rather than into the ground through their feet. And his phrase was, "Don't hang on me. I'm not a meat hook." Yeah. So you got this sense that, yeah, people were just using him as the wrong sort of support. So when, you know, when John stopped coming in, you know, when we moved to that place in Camden, and it was, you know, catching the tube in was just too much for John because of his eyesight. And I said to him, you know, why have you abandoned the class? Why have you forsaken us? You know? And he just said, "I'm just tired of being a crutch. Yeah? I'm just tired of people leaning on me." Yeah? So all these parasites sort of leaning, not really doing their own work. They're just coming each week just to drink from the source and not really taking it anywhere. You know, this is what's so important. Yeah, so it's your own work that keeps the teaching alive inside you. Okay, and now let's just, so again, just doing this, but just letting it become this exercise and just feeling when it pulls back. So here I really have to stretch the muscle this side in order to stimulate it to pull back. This is what we want to feel. So you need to pull the piece of elastic in order to get it to spring back. Because this is just very important, because this is the form all the way through. Yeah. So when you're stepping, you have to grip that bit of ground in order to pull at it. And that is like, it's like opening your mouth to get your teeth in so that you have some purchase. So here, and then I can then pull. But I really have to attach. So I use that end of this phase to grab something which I can then pull. Just like, you know, like climbing a rope. You have to have the hands really open in order to get a really good purchase on the rope. And so this is what, so when you're doing the form, it's like you're climbing a rope, or you're consuming something. You're pulling like that piece of spaghetti. That's really like a magical scene, you know, Lady and the Tramp. They're both sucking the same string of spaghetti. Those Disney cartoons, they're real sources of real archetypes, you know, real sort of symbolism that is just so fundamental to our being. I think another movie that's like fundamentally true is like The Matrix. You know, so we're all these sort of domesticated farm animals, and we're being milked all the time. So ego is just sapping our energy, and culture is just the collective ego. So you can't fight it. You can't take up arms and fight the system. Is all you can do is slip beneath it, is just slip into a reality that was there before it. Yeah. So this sense that the human ego is, you know, basically evil is a relatively modern phenomenon. And so there is a sense of humanness that's actually prior to that. And we just slip into, so it's like really slipping into deep time, slipping into the unconscious, you know, because it's all there in the unconscious. So the unconscious really is just the sea of the past, this sort of vast ocean that contains everything that has ever impinged upon the human, yeah? So we can just tap into it, but you do that through meditation. This is what all magic tries to do, really. Real magic, yeah. So, and just feeling this turning, it's almost like you're boring a hole into the earth so that something can come gushing up, like you're drilling for oil. So you're going down, but something is coming up. So there is a real balance. Yeah, so you're feeling the effort all in these muscles in the lower back. Hopefully, if your legs are strong enough, your legs can just do it. And then you can really get into the real source of the power, which is your lower back. Okay, so let's just bring it back. So this real sense that something in, so I turn this way a little bit to allow the tentacle from my sacrum this side reach down into this leg, and then I need to turn this way a little bit. So that's basically relaxed legs. That's what it means to relax the legs. You relax the tentacle out of the spine, down the leg. But it's not just a relaxation. You have to intend it, otherwise it just won't happen. It's something that wants to happen, but we've been inhibiting it for so long. So what we take as natural is unnatural. It's like the fundamental law of the human universe, really. So that beautiful quote of Krishnamurti, it is no sign of health to be well adjusted to a supremely sick society. Yeah? So it's those of us that are the outliers, that are the ones that just seem to be sick, yeah, like madness, you know, like Nietzsche and, you know, those other Foucault, you know, those guys that they just went a bit mad because they were just operating outside the system. The system domesticates you, it drains you, it conforms you. It crushes spirit and makes everything solid and visible. It produces consumable products, yeah? So basically, ego, bourgeoisie, capitalism, you know, they're just the same phenomenon, but at different scales. And it's a bit, you know, like the noisy mind. It's just something that's just, okay, you can't stop it, but you don't have to give it any attention. So your heart is elsewhere. Okay. So now let's just try stepping backwards and forwards. So just feeling this, so putting like the toes down, and so really opening the toes and then just letting them curl it. So this thing of grabbing the ground that Nitzan talks about. So 1. And then pulling here. Yeah, so we're just trying to just feel the feet as these really like active, they're like two little animals, really. And they're quite wild if you let them. It's the wrong word, really. I mean, they use, you know, there's a lot of rewilding workshops where you can go into the wilderness and reconnect to your old wild self. Yeah. I mean, the best we could possibly do is to become feral. You know, become like feral dogs or feral cats, because you can't rewild. Yeah. If you've lost it, it's gone. You can get an image of it, but it's always a poor image. Yeah, so what is it that moves us? It's this action of opening really wide and then closing. And as I close here, this one just naturally opens. It's just the way we're structured. If we were kangaroos bouncing around, it would be different. But we're not. We've got left and right, and they alternate. So here I clench, and this opens in order to take the next bite. Yeah, so it's just that spirit. This is, it's difficult for people because we're so tired. I found this book by this woman who she's into sort of resting, taking naps. She's a bishop of the nap ministry. It's great. It's a beautiful idea, because we're all just exhausted. So that's largely what depression is. We just don't have the energy to rouse our spirits. There's no spirit anymore. So here, so it's like the opposite of cool. So when you're cool, you're basically trying to do everything as efficiently as possible so that you appear as though you're sort of knowledgeable and expert. Here, we're just trying to be as inefficient as possible. So we're just trying to put as much energy into something that's incredibly simple, something that's banal even, yeah. In order just to conjure spirit, to bring the spirit up. And then when the spirit's up, you're in a different world. Okay, so now let's go the other way. Again, just, it's really organic. It's got this pump of spirit. So it's very much like prowling energy. You're on the prowl. You're hunting. Like Casaneda says, you have to become a hunter, but a hunter of power. Yeah, so when your spirit is up and you're working well, then you become powerful. Ooh. And just feel the little toes and the little fingers. It's like they become more and more important, because it's like my little toe is the part that reaches furthest and then starts the curling. So the return into the clenched fist starts at the little finger. Oh, it's here. This is the yielding. So the leg and the hand are both yielding. So, ooh. So when we've worn shoes all our life, our little toes sort of angle in towards the big toe. So the front of the foot does this. You see, especially my old ladies, because they've worn high heels and things, where the foot is always sliding down into this front of the foot, and the toes. Some of them, you just can't tell that they have toes, because it's like the flesh has just grown into the next toe. So we want the feeling that our little toe actually really can stick out a long way. It doesn't just go forwards, it really goes out to the side. It's a bit like the peripheral vision. That's where the blurred stuff, the interesting stuff, the energy is. It's not in the middle. So real spirit is always with the minority, with the immigrants, the people that don't belong. Okay, so let's just bring it back again. Again, just feeling the spine. So what's difficult and what we really have to try and appreciate is that it doesn't just require a different use of the body, it requires a different mind. Because when the body is integrated, then the mind changes. So the hierarchy within the body is only there because my mind is organized in a certain way. There's a hierarchy in my mind which is reflected in my body. And if I want my body to integrate and just become centered here, then the same thing basically has to happen in the mind. And that is difficult because no one can really tell you what to do or how to do it. You just have to practice, like trial and error. Every now and then you're sitting in something park, and it is very much like it just becomes open. It's like you've opened a door and then something can happen. So we're always keeping the doors closed. This is what the ego does. Because it's frightened. It's frightened that if the doors remain open, first of all, your strength and energy will just dissipate. And also the stranger will come in. This is what we're terrified of. This is what just doesn't happen anymore. There's no encounter with the stranger. And now the stranger is just an inconvenience that means you have to look up from your phone. So in the old days, the stranger was the possibility of a story. So when you saw the stranger, you were interested in what they had to tell, because they would tell stories of where they came from, which was different from where you came from. So now, actual reality is now just a distraction from one's virtual reality. Someone said to me recently, was on the train, they said, no one looks out of the window anymore. And it's true. Sad. It's like with Tai and her friends, one of the delights for me was driving them to school, which I used to do, which is only once a week. So it was like a novelty every time I did it. Because you'd have these three kids in the back seat, just all laughing and chatting. And it's the same three kids that I take to school now, but they don't even acknowledge the other when they get in the car. They're just on their phones, and it's completely silent, and it's an ugly silence. It's a nervous silence. So, when Tai's on her phone, the silence is so different than when she's reading. She's reading a book, it's like you can sense the imagination almost, just becoming something, and the room filling with this imagination. When they're on the phone, it's just like a nervous anxiety that's just being channeled. And it takes your energy. It's ugly. Okay, now let's just use that clutching the ground just to walk, yeah? So the Tai Chi walk. So this sense that you've always got your balance, but this, so the way we're doing it now, I'm pulling myself into the foot. And just feeling as you pull the weight in, the weight goes into the heel, and then everything changes. It becomes settled and peaceful. But then it allows this one to come up. So here now, this is really active, the front of the foot. It's drawing me in, and slowly as I settle into the heel, I reach that peace, yeah? And then here, this one. So we just want to feel the change, really. It's always up to do with changes, process. So here, ooh, and whoa. Yeah, so what you'd like is when you do the form, for the steps to be exactly the same as this. And that feeling that as you're coming into the leg, you're really drawing that tentacle, the extension of the spine down the leg and into the heel. So, ooh. So when the weight goes into the foot, it's almost like I'm standing on the end of my tentacle. So you just, this real sense at the bottom of the spine from the sacrum down is always extending downwards. Whereas normally we're pushing it up all the time when we walk and when we do normal things, which is producing the lordosis in the lower back and this sense of your bum sticking out. So it's just really we're just looking at what it really means to have your bum in. So, ooh. And then you can just bring the leg that comes up, just bring the knee up a little bit higher. Yeah, so we just want this, as we bring the knee up, it pulls you down even more into the supporting leg. It looks great. So what you want, if you, a really good tool really is just to, if you've paid for Zoom, or just use the webcam just to record yourself and then just see. You want this real sense that the spine here, the lordosis is gone. So the min meng here is pushing backwards, and this is just a smooth curve here. And you can just pull the knee up to help that even more. So you just really want a sense that you've got a lot of fluidity, a lot of ripply flexibility in the lower back. You can just okay. So let's just bring it back because it's getting a bit late. So let's just finish just by squatting down. So this is just really important. So you get a real sense of the Dan Qian, partly because it's sort of under pressure, and partly because you've sort of collapsed into it naturally.
But we just want that, feel the Min Meng. So this feeling that the part of the spine above the Min Meng is sort of rising up and over the head and down into the heart. And then the part of the spine beneath the Min Meng is just dropping down and coming under into the Dan Shen. So when we're in this posture, we're very much packaged like a parcel. Yeah, and this can just, for me, this is like a meditation posture. So I'm in this about half an hour a day now, just as a bit of variation. And again, just you settle onto the ground in order to go into the ground. So this sense of the iceberg. Yeah, so this ocean of the unconscious that slips back into the mists of time. So there's that Indian, I can always forget his name because I've never been able to say it, but it begins with an E. And what, he's trying to get people to meditate, and the technique used. So rather than it being a chanting of mantra, what he would suggest is that you basically just learn just 3 or 4 texts of beautiful writing, like a poem. Or, you read sort of, those female novelists. I tried reading them to Tai and she just couldn't understand the English, but it's just the act of reading elevates you because the prose is so unbelievably beautiful. So this sense that as you just recite it in your mind, it's sort of bringing you somewhere. So like the Lord's Prayer, really, that's one of the most beautiful poems ever written. Even if you don't believe in the Christian God, it's still incredibly useful. Like Rupert Sheldrake said, basically, it just gets everything in. So it's the quickest and the easiest way of getting it all in. People don't know it anymore. And it being one of the first things I learned at school, how to say the Lord's Prayer. And just look at the jaw. Yeah, so that's one of the places where we sort of really construct ourselves from. So we just clench the jaw, if only a little bit, especially when you're sleeping. You know, a lot of people grind their teeth. So the shape of the top of people's teeth is often the product of their grinding. It's like with Tai, used to wake me up sometimes when her teeth would grind. So just relaxing that, and then you really do just slip into like the ocean. You just have to not be frightened of it. Okay, so let's just come up again now. And just feel, it's almost like a violence, ripping yourself away from the ground. So you want this sense that, oh, you're still being pulled down. You've just stretched the connection rather than broken it. Okay, so let's just bring it up. You know, so when I'm down there, just imagine that someone's like thrown like a sheet, like a rubber sheet over you, and it's just, then they've nailed it down. So when you stand up, it's a real effort to stand because that elastic, that rubbery elastic is pulling you down. And just not locking the legs. The legs are always working in that sort of elastic way. I don't just freeze them out. So energy is always sort of just very fluid, yeah? It's got a sense of a liquid or a gas. So as soon as it freezes and becomes solid, basically there's no energy. And that's what the ego is trying to do that all the time. It's just trying to freeze out energy. Just get rid of ambiguity, make everything clear and known. So we're always slipping back into the sea. Okay, great. So let's